Today we'll resume the part two. This is the same seminar, Creative Research and Innovation. We're still on the phenomenal starting point and conscientious logic. Ever since the first presentation, something else happened, and it's important kind of review contemporary events. We talked about truth cannot be transitory, it cannot be changed. Only entity that can change it is the owner of truth, which is the creator. Sure enough, I think it's very recent, maybe yesterday's. This is from UK. Breastfeeding now is called chest feeding. And all the midwives are instructed to call it chest feeding. This is an example of the fact that we're talking about. Truth cannot be logical, and it cannot be transitory. Every day we see that happening around us, and nobody's saying, what kind of truth is that? Again, why? Because we don't have a standard. We cannot say you violated that particular standard. Everybody is making a proof. Another contemporary event, US is engaged in second impeachment of President Trump, and the Constitution clearly says the word impeachment does not apply to anybody who is not in public office. So it's absurd to think that Trump has left the White House, he's no longer the president, yet setting aside all the pressing issues, Senate is trying President Trump. It doesn't stop there. Numerous companies are doing survey, all paid for. Nobody does it for free, and they discovered that majority support conviction, 52%. Doesn't matter how illogical it is, but people support. And 45% opposite. It's very curious because this is even larger majority than the votes, so-called the Biden win. So it seems that some people who voted for Trump, they have opted to support his conviction. It's completely illogical. It has no meaning whatsoever. Yet they are holding this shenanigan. Nobody's asking what public opinion has to do with truth. Truth should not matter. Even if 500 jurors convicted Socrates, it doesn't make him a convict. It doesn't make him a criminal. If so, all the prophets would be criminal today. And we'll talk about it. It was well known. Truth was never popular. And that's history, human history. Majority always opposed the truth, even during Prophet Muhammad's time. Even during Rashidun Khilafat time, everybody said, wow, they're controlling 1/5 of the earth, such a big empire. Still, truth speakers, truth seekers were never supported. I'm not saying that Trump is a prophet. What I'm saying is that there is absolutely disconnect between truth and perception of truth. There's no relation between the two. And it really starts with not having a standard. That's why it's so important to start with a premise, major premise, and stick with a minor premise right from the beginning. Today I was saying that, look, all the prophets, including Jesus, was opposed. Right away, one Christian said, oh, no, Jesus was not a prophet. He was God. You see how it works? All of a sudden, you forget history. And this person is from Middle East, so they should know Jesus of Nazareth was not God. The concept of Trinity was implemented by Roman Catholic Church. It was the same Roman who killed, so-called killed him, made up the Trinity. And it's a historical fact. But that is brought in. So I was thinking, why people do that? Say I say, well, Jesus is God. So what? What does that do? Is Trump God? That's why they're opposing him? And can you explain then, if they are opposed to Jesus and opposed to Trump, Biden is a Catholic. Why should he be opposing Jesus? So whole argument. Then again, you cannot explain why people oppose Prophet Muhammad, why people oppose good Muslims all over the world. Why was the war on terror on Islam? Why was Islam called terrorism? Why people consider Quran, the only divine book, as a terror manifesto? Cannot explain anything. Why? Because he got stuck with your falsehood, which is Jesus is God. So I told that person that, just let it go. It's okay. As long as you understand the message that bad people always oppose truth, that's enough. Let's not debate on what is truth for you and what not. Anyway, this is always there, and it's quite tiring. It can be all made simple. What is your first premise? What is your major premise? What is your minor premise? And let's stick to that. Let's not debate the premises. And based on that, we move on. So for a conclusion to be true, both major and minor premises have to be true. If one of them is not true, it's bad enough. If minor premise is not true, it doesn't matter how you go. So that really answers a lot of questions that people have, that how come so-called God-fearing people are misguided. You have to think, what God? How does it help to believe in on God when you have no other premise? You have to say, well, if it is a true God, he must have communicated with us. So there is a need to recognize the communication. Remember the triangle from Shen to Jing to Qi, the Chinese triangle. So it's not empowering the Trinity, it's recognizing that God communicated with the prophets and prophets communicated with us. If you do not have that link, if you do not recognize that, you can make up anything. Typically, the word deduction even means from one point to another point. So you have to have an axis. Axis doesn't have 3 points as the axis of evil goes. That's not mathematically correct. You need only 2 points to draw your conclusion. And the conclusion can be anything if the second point is not there. So most of the God-fearing people, if they stop there, they have only 1 point. You can draw a circle. You can say anything you want, and you can justify that conclusion is from God. So it's not even enough that you start with Quran. And many people, especially Quranists, they say, well, why do we need a prophet? We have everything we want in Quran. So there is a visual example. How does it help to know everything has to be Quran, but you don't have the context? Not a single word of Quran can be interpreted unless you put it in context. And we'll see that later, how facts or data have no meaning. Today, there was another news that said that only 20%, actually, this is a fact, okay? Fact is 20% have confidence in Biden. And 80% obviously do not have confidence in him. So how is the media portraying that? They're saying 20% have confidence in Biden. It's a big news. No, 80% do not have confidence. That should be the focus. So you're talking about having confidence as if it kind of dignifies him. The fact is exactly opposite. So your conclusion has nothing to do with the data. So you can invoke Quran, you can invoke Bible, it doesn't make any difference unless you have second point, which is the minor premise in there. If you have both, then you have a straight line. Many people say that the straight line is the Tao, or the pathway is the straight line, Sirat al-Mustaqim, as it's called in Arabic. That's what it means. The source and the context, they are both used. So you cannot randomly draw a straight line and say, because the source is correct, everything is correct. It has no meaning. And as such, truth is unique. It's not a matter of agreeing to disagree, because you cannot say, well, there are two versions of truth and we are both cool because we decided to not agree. No, you cannot say that. You either have to agree that there are two versions of truth, or you have to say one person is deliberately not choosing the truth. And obviously, there cannot be two versions of truth. So you have to debate until you establish that your conclusion is truly based on true premises. Otherwise, it's off. And by the way, conclusions cannot be arbitrary, it cannot be true. No judge would ever say he's guilty or not guilty at the same time. And then, people say, well, that's judge, who am I? Who am I to judge? No, you are every day, every moment you're judging, starting with your own performance. Why do you even do anything without the intention of improving something? When you have decided to eat, you already judged that food will feed your hunger. So, as mentioning, Plato, as early as Plato, and there's a trend. When I give reference to people before Prophet Muhammad's time, you have to realize that we really have no idea they actually said it or not. In Europe and some of Indian also, the original writing was translated in Arabic, and then in Europe at least, they translated from Arabic to Latin, and then from Latin to English and whatever language. So that's the time. So there was nothing that came to Europe directly from ancient Greek or ancient whatever language they were using. It was through Arabic. So we cannot confirm. A few days ago, a very good guy asked me, he quoted one of the Chinese scholars, and he said, did he actually say that? You know what? As reasonable as it sounds, I cannot tell you for sure he said it. The only book that for sure anybody spoke is Quran. You know why? Because it has been preserved for 1400 years ago, and every day you can check with any Hafiz of Quran somebody memorized. It's the same one. There is no two version. Next, most important book is the book of Hadith, the Prophet. Has not changed in 1200 years. And both remain intact in their original form. It's in Arabic. Nothing has changed. So even then, what happens? We come across these sayings of ancient scholars, and of course, when it matches what you know in Quran, that's when we say, you know what? There's another verse in Quran that says every nation had a prophet. So maybe it's telling us that this guy was prophetic, either prophet himself or a disciple of a prophet. And sure enough, you can find out there are all kind of other similarities, but you can sort it out. One such statement from Plato was, the truth for him meant creator. Guess what? In Arabic, it's exactly the same term. The truth is al-haq. So he had no illusion. What it said on top, that God or creator is the only one who doesn't change. You know what it is in Arabic? Something that you cannot touch. It's completely external. It never moves or changes or anything. That's a samad. You cannot fight it. Again, another trait of God in Quran. And in fact, even unique is a trait of God, of creator. So what Plato saw is the truth is the creator, and anything else is not true, is not the truth. And it was translated, I don't know what he actually said, but everything else to him was illusionary. That's how they translate. But I don't think it was illusion. God, creator, did not create illusion. He created them. That's what scientifically I use. Everything else is dynamic. Everything is function of time. Only God, creator, is not. He's constant. And thus, he's also the source of truth. And he created time also. And again, you find the support in Quran. He created time as well as matter. And I was showing the picture yesterday. It's the same concept that's present in every ancient civilization. From what we know. The same guy also said, and this is again another statement, I think it is fairly true. Why am I saying that? Because it's again quite supported by Quran. Said, no one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. You almost think that Trump is the truth teller. It certainly is true for the way liberals behave these days. They have really made Jesus out of Trump, and even Linwood and Sidney Powell, all those so-called Trump supporters. Media, the establishment really hit them. And just look at the news that are coming out every day. Yesterday, the Georgia Secretary of State opened an investigation against Trump, like as if Trump is a criminal now for questioning the validity of the election. And he also went after Linwood and called him that he might have committed a crime. So Linwood now is the guy who allegedly committed election fraud. I mean, talk about gaslighting. Anyway, so this is very important. So you cannot be popular with the truth. So all those people having million views and likes on internet, that's not a good sign, especially if you are a darling of the establishment. I ask you to review history and find out one regime that was tolerant to the truth teller. People say, well, you know, there was 1,000 years of Islamic rule, and there are the Khalifa and all this. They used to call them some Sultan and Khalifa and all this. That's not true. They had zero tolerance for truth teller. What did they allow? They allowed medicine, in astronomy, in engineering, marvelous progress. But in politics, which is really the Tao, you know what the standard? That one, nobody could speak the truth. They're the most brutal against, and those were so-called good Muslims. So I stated that in the abstract, the only regime that not only tolerated truth, but actually encouraged it was Rashidun Khalifa. Of course, you know, on Prophet's, that was Prophet's job, and his biggest contribution to us is create this exemplary society that will remain an example forever. So this concept that truth is unique and truth has something to do with the creator himself, with capital H, is recognized in every society. Here is an example. This is it's a recent article, recent book. I think it's 2016, yes. It's recognizing the way, it's called ways, it's Tao as the standard, is the proper criteria for selecting truth. And what is Tao? This is the prescribed path by the creator. It's exactly the same in ancient India. It's actually spells out, what is the term? Shiva is pure. That's talking about pure, the pure, by the way, is the name of creator. In Arabic, it's Al-Quddus. And it continues. Where is the term? It's missing somewhere. Anyway, they also use the term way, pathway, or law. Yeah, here it is, dharma. So it's saying that it's personification of law. So whenever there was an avatar, whenever there was a prophet that came in, that entity was personified that entity personified divine law. That, in scientific term, is a lawmaker, which is creator, and lawgiver. Where did you get the law? From the prophet, because he's the first one to know, remember? And who made the law? Creator. Who makes the law these days? Who are called lawmaker? The sleaziest, everybody agrees on that. The most corrupt, the most sleazy are politicians, and they call themselves lawmaker. And you don't even think twice. Is it okay to follow them? Is it okay to actually get excited by them? Or is it okay to be even surprised by all their nonsense? Another word, sirata, is the order. In Arabic, it's qadr. Again, exact term that exists in Quran, and you can find out from ancient literature. In Quran, the creator is identified as a creator, al-Khaliq, unique, Lahad, the truth, al-Haq, the poor, al-Qudus, and 95 other unique traits. So just like the truth, all the traits of creator are unique. So what happens if you do not start off with the true premise? What do you call it? It's a false start. What happens after a false start? It doesn't matter how fast you drive, how fast you run, which direction you run, nothing counts. The same way, if your major and minor premises are not true, you're wasting your time. Because faster you run, more hustling you're doing towards what? Ignorance. You're just exhausting your energy. It doesn't stop there. You're actually accumulating ignorance and hubris. You're proud that you went first. We have seen a lot of that. If you get so-called elected in a false election and you know it's not true, you are actually deep in denial of the truth. And you accumulated a lot of pride that, so all of a sudden your ignorance turned into arrogance. Not a good thing. So always take you for first premises, because if you have false premise to begin with, you are only increasing your ignorance and consolidating your arrogance. It was recognized, I talked about it a bit yesterday. Ibn Rushd claimed that all cognition, true cognition, which is thinking process, if it is true, it has to be from Quran. Which is very interesting, because you say this is something that he did not mention, but we did some research what it really means to start with Quran, and we'll talk about it later. But it's the same. By the way, Ibn Rushd is the guy who translated a lot of work of Aristotle, and he was fascinated by this exclusion of middle logic, which is you cannot be A and A. You cannot be A or not A at the same time. You cannot be a male and female at the same time. You cannot be good and bad at the same time. So all these debates about agreeing to disagree disappear. But he recognized that. He said it has to be, starting point has to be Quran. And if it is not Quran, then it's false. guess what? Thomas Aquinas liked that argument. Wow, this is a cool guy. Aquinas, of course, he liked Aristotle, and he did not have access to Aristotle because it was Ibn Rushd who was doing the translation. So he loved Thomas Aquinas because of his writing, and he called Thomas Aquinas called Ibn Rushd the interpreter. And he liked the logic that Ibn Rushd promoted, which is, if it's not from Quran, it's false. So I'll take it, but it cannot be Quran. I'll make it Bible. They both, in English, by the way, and in Latin, is the book. I think I spelled Bible wrong, but it doesn't matter. You understand what I mean? And that was the beginning of the whole lunacy we're looking at. You see, people don't realize that the father of this modern day ignorance comes from Thomas Aquinas. Yet, the same guys, by the way, called Thomas Aquinas the father of dogma. He's the dogma father. Who is Ibn Rushd? Father of secular philosophy. You see, the people do not recognize him as so-called religious and Islamic, as if Islam is a dogma. It's not. Islam has no dogma in it. It's 100% logical. That's why I said, if it is not Islamic, it's not scientific. And West recognizing, they call him father of secular philosophy in Europe. Yet, new scientists, all the guys from Newton onward, they give reference to Thomas Aquinas and never talk about Ibn Rushd. They do not talk about the secular guy, according to them, and they talk about the dogma guy that they hate in principle, and they say, we are secular. But that's why I call both of them hypocritical. Atheists are hypocritical, and deists are also hypocritical. And I'm not just making it up. You can look up, it's a recent book on mathematics, believe it or not. This is a mathematics book. It's not a religious book. And of course, Stephen Hawking talked about Thomas Aquinas. And he talks about what? This book talks about Aristotle, and they jump to Thomas Aquinas. No mention of Ibn Rushd. And then from that point on until today, mathematical book giving reference to Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle. No mention of Ibn Rushd. And according to them, Ibn Rushd is the guy who is secular. You see the disconnection? So people get fascinated, and some idiots actually came up with this notion that, Stephen Hawking talked about Big Bang, and subhanallah, in Quran, it talks about Big Bang. How outrageous is that? Rather than interpreting Quran from Quran first in the context of Prophet's Sunnah, they are taking this guy as God. That's their starting point, and interpreting Quran according to this guy. That's the worst aspect of rebellion against the Creator, the worst form of kufr. And they routinely do that. Search anywhere, all Muslims are very fascinated by Stephen Hawking. So he's the guy who showed us how Quran is speaking about Big Bang. So that point onward, everything went haywire. We have the top, the graph of knowledge, starts with Quran in the context of Hadith, and that's the path. That's the path of Tao. That's the path of Sharia. That's the path that will ultimately give you salvation in hereafter. And we have the other path that was traveled by Europe, completely opposite. The starting point, Bible, remember? And there, so why do you have these zigzags up and down? Anytime anybody try to make sense, add something scientific, that's making the movement upward. But that was quickly reduced. That was that. And you see the history. Anytime any scientist started to confront this mainstream narrative, they were attacked. And some of them committed suicide because they could not take it anymore. Those are the guys tried to push the curve upward. What real knowledge seeking should be, go back, start, travel the other graph. So people do not see this because they have been taught upside down. They literally are standing on their head and they see the progress as they climb. That's the Islamic terrorism form. And the cancer movement is the one they're looking at progress. And that's the one I call it, Israel is the fountain of democracy. All the good things. They see bad things as good and good as bad. So literally Quran calls it groveling on your face, and scientifically I call that standing on your head. Everything's turned upside down. I'll stop right there and we'll continue. So the bottom line is the starting point has to be phenomenal. Otherwise, we are traveling the wrong path. And it doesn't matter how fast you travel.